Well, hello everyone. I'm Jeff Kogan, and we're here today with Gohar Vardanyan. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. It's good to see you, and we are looking forward to the performance tonight. Uh, and I'd like to talk to you and ask you a little bit about your background and your program and
Mhm.
whatever else comes to mind.
Sounds good.
So, why don't you tell us about your educational background, and we'll get started there.
Okay, well, I can start from the beginning. My whole getting into guitar started way before I can remember. Back in Armenia, my dad is a guitar teacher. So before I was born, it was decided already that I'm going to play the guitar as long as I had all my 10 fingers and I had some sense of pitch and rhythm. That would be helpful. So he started me on the guitar up until I was about 13-ish. Yeah, 13, which is when we came to the US to continue the guitar education. And I studied with Anatonigoni at the pre-college division at Juilliard for about 3 years. Went on to the Interlochen Arts Academy, which is a boarding high school in northern Michigan. There I studied with John Wunsch, who is the current owner of Strings by Mail. So I'm sure the audience will know who he is. I did my high school there because I was a little older for my grade because of the way credits transferred or didn't transfer from my schooling in Armenia. I crammed 4 years of high school in 3 years. So I was only there for three, not all 4 years. Then I went on to Baltimore to Peabody Conservatory to study with Manuel Pagueka. And after that, came back to Juilliard to do my master's with Sharon Isbin.
Fantastic.
So that's kind of the short version.
Okay. Well, tell us what it was like studying with Manuel Pagueka.
Well, he has been kind of mine and my dad's, I guess, idol growing up listening to him. Maybe more so my dad when I was younger, because I was a very stubborn child. And if my dad had one thing that he liked, I had to like something else on purpose. So it's not the same. I always said like, no, I like John Williams. And I would, as a kid, I remember these arguments where he would tell me like, to listen to something on like Pagueka's recording and be like, no, but I like Williams, just to be opposite. But in reality, like, I liked Manuel's playing. So for me to study with him was kind of like a dream come true. You don't really know if you're going to get in. So when I auditioned for college, Peabody was on the list, but I never knew I would get in to go. So when I did, that was incredible to actually sit in front of the person that you've been listening to all this time and have him directly comment on your playing. I feel like that's where I really stopped being a fast and loud child player to become a more, because I always had like the technical ability to use the instrument was given to me early on from my dad and stuff. So I could always play like fast and loud, I'd say. But to become a musician, to play music, to go after perfection and how to get there and how to approach music where technique is actually invisible. Like ideally, you don't see the technique, you hear the music and you don't see the difficulty of the piece. That's what it should be. So I learned that from him with my 4 years at Peabody.
If you don't mind me asking, how did he go about teaching you that sort of thing?
In the beginning, it was slow practicing. I remember my very, very first lesson. I was learning the Gran Solo. I always liked that and the piece, and I liked his version that he did, which is Aguado's arrangement on his CD. So I played it, and I mean, for a guitarist who can use the instrument fairly well, Gran Solo is not the hardest piece. So I learned it in 2 weeks, thinking like, look at me, I memorized this piece in like 2 weeks, and I played it for him. And now I know it was a total mess. But back then, he asked me like, so how slow do you practice? And I played it a smidge slower than what the final tempo is. And he's like, no, that's not slow enough. And he put the metronome on 50. And that was my eighth note. And Gran Solo at 50 with the eighth note, it's like dum ba ba bum ba. Like the beginning was dum da da dum da da dum da da dum da da dum. That was painful. And to the perfection of it kind of started with practicing really slowly and not excusing anything. I didn't realize how choppy things actually sounded, how disconnected things were, until I started practicing slow. And it's like zooming in and seeing all the pixels, all the gaps between the sounds. That was like from the technical standpoint, to just really clean it to that perfection. He would make us at home, of course, not in the lesson. He didn't like embarrass us that way to make us sing in the lesson, but the idea was that we would sing all of the phrases and make it sound as beautiful as we possibly could with ourselves, because the voice, even if you're not a good singer, it doesn't have the same technical limitations as playing the instrument, because playing the instrument goes through your hands. So if your hands have technical limitations, you cannot actually play the phrasing the way you want, but you could sing them. So the idea was you would sing it to get an idea of how you want it to sound, and then you teach your fingers to do exactly that, to play what you just sang.
I've always thought of slow practice as being a memorization technique more than anything.
It does that as well. I actually could not play that, what I memorized in 2 weeks, grand solo. I could not play that without music at that tempo. It takes away all muscle memory, like everything.
Yeah.
So you really actually need to know in your brain where the notes go. Otherwise, you can't do it. So it's a great memory technique, but it's also a great way to really zoom in and see what all the extra noise is doing. Any efficiency, if your hand is randomly moving side to side where it doesn't have to, are you actually preparing for the next note? Because you have an eternity between notes. Why not prepare? Why not move the finger where it is about to go, instead of just grab it last minute and panic?
You also mentioned Anatonigoni. I'm quite familiar with her. We've judged together, and I remember her from the guitar competition in the mid-90s, the GFA. And so tell me about studying with her.
She was my first non-parent, well, not my dad, teacher that I had. And with my dad, it was always like some sort of argument or fight, because I was like not someone who would take like being told what to do very easily. So I would always fight with my dad, do the opposite, but I couldn't do that with a teacher that was not my parent. It's always easier to fight with your parents than it is to do it with a stranger. There was a certain level of respect. She was kind of probably the very first person who could get through me and like actually get me to think about music and not just like fight the guitar, but like to learn to phrase and everything. And for me personally, because when I first came to the United States, my mom wasn't here with me. So she was in Argentina, visa issues. So I was with my mom, and with my dad, and I was a teenage girl, but I didn't really like know what to do with hair and stuff. And I remember how motherly Antigoni was, even though she was young, like in her 20s. But before a student recital once, she was fixing we joke about it all the time, but I had brushed out my curly hair, which is a big no-no. You do not brush your curly hair. But it was like this big gigantic mess on my head. And she was trying to like put it together and like tie it somehow so it looks semi-presentable, literally like 10 minutes before the student recital that we had to play at pre-college Juilliard. So she was always like really warm and caring, and it was a nice figure to have, because she's a wonderful person. Before actually being a musician and a guitar teacher, as a person, she's a wonderful person. So it was I think I started crying when I learned that she moved, so she was going to move from New York to Brussels. I came back from Interlaken, and we would always like catch up over coffee. And when she told me, I started crying.
Wow. So as far as studying with your father, without being too personal about it, but was it strange? I mean, learning from your father, was he a hard taskmaster, or was he
strange? No, I mean, I don't know any different. So I wouldn't be able to say what's strange or not. I've never had, like as a kid, I never had those weekly lessons that you go to class and you come back and you practice the 6 days in between. I never had that. It was unique in a way that instead of lessons and then practicing, I would literally just have daily lessons, and not like an hour, but whenever he could catch me between friends and playing outside and stuff, because I wasn't one of those kids who was forced to practice 4 hours a day. Sometimes you hear young children who play well at a certain age, that literally all they do is practice. That wasn't me. I had a childhood, but also in between, the time that I spent with the guitar was actually more productively used because it was supervised. So I didn't waste time. Like, it was very specific. If I sat down with the guitar to do something, he was there to tell me what to do. I was bribed to play. If I played well, or if I practiced without fighting him, then I would get Snickers bars or toys or ice cream or whatever, anything that would get a kid to not fight back.
Yeah, I don't remember any of my teachers bribing me in that way, but
No, they wouldn't. It would probably all that sugar. Your parents would probably have a talk with them.
right, right. Okay. Well, to sort of change our tack here a little bit. So what would you say about your approach to program building and your repertoire and the music that interests you?
The programming, I've kind of been very selfish in some ways. I only play pieces that I like. And so far, I've been lucky where I could get away with that, even through school. Of course, when I was younger, either my dad chose my repertoire or Antigoni would suggest things, because there are certain things that you need to learn. I couldn't just play only things that I want. But ever since college, I would pick the pieces that I wanted, and I would ask, either Pagueka or Sharon, like, do you mind if we work on this? And they would either choose one or suggest something out of the repertoire that I chose. So I've been able to just pick pieces that I really enjoy listening to. And I knew that spending all that time with those pieces would be something that I could do. So I've chosen that. Of course, during school, and this is such a long time ago, but you have to play some contemporary music. So I did do that as a student. But ever since I graduated, no one has forced me to play it. And since personally, I don't really enjoy working on it, like I can't see myself playing something very modern, contemporary, dissonant, and spending like a year or so learning the piece before putting it in front of an audience. I just haven't done it. So I'm being I like the piece, I play it. I don't like the piece, I don't play it. And that's been my approach. For programming, I try to make it as diverse as possible within the genres that I enjoy, which is basically from Baroque to 20th century, but kind of the Rodrigo Tedesco Turina kind of 20th century, and not so much Henze or Brouwer, that 20th century. There's a difference. But try to make it different so that the audience is not subjected to like exactly the same thing. So for example, today, it will be some aguaros, so some classical music, some albenis, which is more romantic Spanish. There'll be some barrios and lauro, where it's Latin American, and the pieces themselves are different from each other. Some Rodrigo, which is probably a little bit more on the edge, which I really do love Rodrigo. So I try to make it friendly for the audience instead of, let's say, playing an entire Bach suite or, even though I do love Bach, but I don't program it very often.
If you were to choose a contemporary composer, somebody who writes maybe in a style that you appreciate, rather than maybe some of the more I don't know how to put it, but crazy stuff that you don't want
Yeah.
But who would be a composer that you could see learning a contemporary work by?
Recently, I worked with Giuseppe Torrisi, an Italian composer. He recently passed away, unfortunately. But he wrote music that's just beautiful music, even though it was written very recently. I worked on a Caprice Españolo, a Spanish Caprice by him. So that's been my connection recently that I've worked with. I can't really think of a top of my head who would work with or want to play that isn't what we call crazy contemporary music. I'll have to think about it more, because I just haven't explored that part. If it's composers that are just mostly already not alive, or just from our past, from our guitar history, I do like the music of Asensio, which is kind of borderline, I guess. It's not as modern, but I do enjoy Asensio. I do enjoy Rodrigo. I do enjoy some pieces by Brouwer. It just wouldn't be like Espiral Eterna, for example. Something that still resembles the more harmonic style.
So we've all been sort of in our living rooms and our computer rooms
Yeah.
for a year now. And with the pandemic, how has it affected you and your career and your teaching?
In some ways, not a lot. I think because even before it started, I was basically teaching majority of the time, and I was playing concerts as about 10 concerts a year or so. So it wasn't what I did most of my time. That's not what was my income. So the teaching changed, where I don't teach in person anymore. The dynamic changed. I still teach the same students. For the most part, the students that I used to teach in person are now on the other side of a screen, but I'm still working with the same people. I didn't really lose a lot during the pandemic, where I know a lot of people have, especially people who really relied on live performances for their career. Kind of balanced out. I do miss performing, and I think to some degree it's going to affect the quality of a performance once we do start performing live again, because the last time I played in front of an audience was in February last year. So, and we all know performing, you don't practice that in a practice room. You practice performing while you're performing. So the more frequently you do it, the more comfortable you are, the better you play. So after a year, it's going to be a nerve-wracking one, that first one to do. So that's the missing of that live performance. That's what's kind of lacking. But everything else, I mean, it really just three-dimensional world became a two-dimensional world on my screen, which is it's lucky for a lot of people. That's not the case.
Yeah, yeah. When you're not teaching and performing, you're in New York or near New York City and Manhattan. You're in.
I'm going to be a New Yorker and say that Queens is still New York City.
Okay.
No, I am. Yeah, I mean, I'm in New York City. I'm just not in the borough of Manhattan.
So what do you do for fun? Is there anything to do there? Or
I mean, for events and things, not so much. And because of course everything, all the events are kind of shut down. They're starting to open up a little bit, like the big venues are opening up, but I was never a sports person, so I'm not going to go watch a basketball game. But the restaurants and stuff are open for outdoor dining and stuff. So you wanted to go out and eat something outside of your own kitchen, you can do that. My escape has been going outside as much as possible, to just get out of the four walls. And that's kind of it. Walking around when the weather is nice, the streets are open. You can do whatever. And stores are open too. It's just that, what am I shopping for? There's nowhere to go for, like, if I went to clothes shopping. So it's a little bit on the empty side. I am enjoying the fact that there are no tourists around, not as many. So all of those touristy locations where usually as someone who lives here, you avoid like the plague. You just do not go to Times Square. You do not go to certain parts, just because they're just so crowded. I can go there and I can take pictures and I can walk without navigating a bunch of lost people. So in some ways, someone who lives here, it's kind of nice. It's not good for the business, but it's really good for the peace that you get having the city to yourself.
Well, yeah, I just wonder what it was like, before the pandemic started for you. Now, you hadn't been in New York that long, had you?
Oh, I've been here on and off since 1998.
Oh, okay.
I came here, well, for pre-college, and then I went away for high school. So I was away 9 months of the year, but I was here in the summers and during spring break. Same thing with Baltimore. I would be there 9 months out of the year, but summers and vacation, like spring break and stuff, this was my home base. And I've been here year round since 2008, where when I came back to Juilliard, I was here all the time. So I have been. Before the pandemic, for fun, I didn't really have much time for fun. I mean, it was, you're either teaching or you're commuting for teaching, or you're practicing, or I was traveling. So, for fun, if I got a chance to get out of the city to go hiking or something, just to see a tree other than concrete, the jungle that we live in, that was it. Outdoorsy stuff, concerts, museums, that's kind of the stuff what I did before the pandemic for fun.
What else do you hope to accomplish in your career?
Honestly, I haven't really thought about it. I mean, I'm kind of, you just kind of go along every day. There's repertoire that I want to learn. I feel like we're always striving to be a better player, better musician, better teacher. I'm kind of happy with what I'm doing. I like teaching privately and not teaching for a university. I like the freedom that it gives me. So I personally don't have like that aspiration of like landing a gig somewhere teaching at a university. If I can continue doing what I'm doing with making videos, teaching privately, playing concerts, that would be pretty ideal. So keeping it the way it is actually pretty nice.
Okay. What about ensemble work?
The last one I've done is when I was at school. Not necessarily on purpose. It's just the the setting of like life, especially here. Everyone kind of does their own thing, so it's even been difficult to get together with other guitarists to just hang out, because everyone has such a different schedule. So I haven't really tried really to play with anyone. I do like solo repertoire, so it doesn't bother me. If I were to play, it would probably only be a duet. I personally don't like groups, big groups in general. I'm more of a one-on-one kind of person. So I would like to play with another guitarist, someone that we match in terms of just musical idea, instrument, everything, like the way we think, and maybe other instruments. But more probably guitar, because I don't know, violin and flute and singers are kind of the only other instruments I can think of, unless we have to commission new music to, yeah.
That'll give you an excuse to play some new music.
That's true. That's true. Maybe that's why I've been avoiding it.
Yeah. No, you have to find a composer who you have an affinity.
Yeah, with whom we could. It's really, there's a lot to do. It's just at the end of the day, there's priorities, of course, but there's no time for everything. If most of my day is spent teaching, and if I'm not teaching, then I am practicing to be able to play the concert. So of course you can prioritize and do less teaching and do that, but I prefer teaching than to work in an ensemble. So preference wise, I give it to what I enjoy more.
Okay. All right. Well, are there any other things that you'd like to tell our audience, the Orange County Guitar Circle audience?
Probably only one thing, only because this would happen if this was a live concert. And I would usually say a couple of things about a piece before I played it. And most of the pieces on this program are pretty self-explanatory, and they're probably very familiar with it. The only piece that usually benefits from a little introduction is the Rodrigo's introduction, in Evocación y Danza, Evocation and Dance. Because when you listen to it, and if you're not like used to it, it might be a little weird sounding. And I remember actually from Antigoni, when I first learned this piece, she told me this story to kind of make me understand what I was playing as I was playing it. And the piece is based on El Amor Brujo by Manuel de Falla, and it's an homage to Manuel de Falla. Rodrigo actually borrows a lot of musical material from El Amor Brujo in Evocation. And the story itself is also loosely based on what El Amor Brujo is, where there is a woman who's being haunted by her dead husband, and she's trying to evoke the spirit of the husbands who kind of come to earth. And if you think of when you're listening to Evocación y Danza, you hear the evocation part, that whole beginning with the harmonics as it builds up. If you think of a woman trying to evoke a spirit to come from the other world to our world, and the dance is the part where the spirit arrives and they dance together and settle their unfinished business or whatever it is. And at the end of the piece, where it kind of calms down again, the spirit goes away and leaves her alone. Then the piece sort of makes more of you have a picture to why is like whatever is happening in that music is happening. That's kind of probably the only thing I would add. Everything else, it's familiar repertoire. I'm sure people will, they'll make their own opinions.
Okay. Well, we're very excited about your performance, and I'm sure our audience will greatly enjoy it. I haven't watched it yet. I'm going to watch it along with the live stream.
Good. Yep.
And I'm making it a point not to spoil it for myself so I can watch it with.
So you don't have to watch it twice. It's
Yeah.
also a lot of material to watch twice.
That's true. That's true. Okay. Well, Gohar Vardanyan, thank you very much for talking with us and sharing some of your interesting stories and your background. We really appreciate it. I look forward to the concert, and I hope our audience will all attend, and tell your friends, tell everybody, and let's get lots of views on this thing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. All right. Thank you.